Hello and welcome to Legalese. I'm Ernie Hyde, your host for the program. Today we're going to be talking about specialty courts, and I have two very special guests with me. One you've seen before, one you haven't. With me to my right is Judge Michael Brooks.
Hi, Ernie.
Judge Brooks is a district court judge in Lawrence District Court. And Jeffrey Patterson. Jeffrey is a detective sergeant from Littleton, and after a little bit of work, I even got sergeant spelled correctly. So thanks to Judge Brooks, of course. But Jeff is here to talk about his experience in one of those specialty courts as well. So let's begin, Judge, by talking about very briefly what district court is and what we do in district court, and then we can move right into what the specialty courts are within it.
Okay. Well, the district court is the court that most people go to. It's the kind of the people's court in the sense that you have a variety of civil and criminal matters. Criminal matters, you have misdemeanors and some felonies. That you have your speeding ticket appeals, civil matters with amounts of $25,000 or less in dispute. So, it's the court that most people go to. That they're on it's the largest in terms of number of courts in the trial court system in Massachusetts as well. And so that's the district court.
Okay, and they are typically what we would call community courts because they have a jurisdiction around them that are made up of towns within a very close geographic region to the court or location to the court, right?
We like to think so. Air, for example, I know goes all the way out to Townsend.
Ashby.
All
the way out to Ashby.
And then as far east, I think, as Littleton, which is one of the largest jurisdictions, I think, in the state. But yes, most district courts have a district, which is usually 5, 6, 9 towns, something like that. There are a couple of district courts that are just one town. Newton is just the city of Newton. But most courts are a variety of communities in a small geographic area, which is why they're so accessible to most people and why the system is set up for them to be, for the district courts to be the court that most people use when they go to court.
Okay. And just for everyone's information, the town served by the Air District Court, which is what we normally deal in, Ashby, Air, Boxborough, Devon's part of it, at least, Dunstable, Groton, Littleton, Pepperell, Shirley, Townsend, and Westford. So those are the towns that make up the judicial district, if you will, of the district court in Air. Okay, so let's talk about specialty courts. And first of all, why do we have specialty courts? And then what are they? I mean, what kinds of courts are they?
Well, the specialty courts developed first, as I understand it, regarding drug courts. And it was really another term that's used more nationally than specialty courts is problem-solving courts. That is, they're courts that are created for dealing with one particular problem. And we need to clarify that it isn't literally a separate court. In Massachusetts, all the specialty courts are, in fact, probation. It's a condition of probation that you enter and complete the drug court, for example, and that is a intensive, supervised program which involves a judge, an attorney, a police officer, treatment providers, probation officers, and occasionally other types of professionals, and who work as a team, the DA, thank you, who work together with probationers who have chosen to be in drug court. And drug court, obviously by its name, deals with people who have substance abuse problems. It isn't just drugs, it could be alcohol as well. Mm-hmm. And I think the first drug court was in Miami in the 1980s. And they're all over the country now. I think there's a couple of thousand nationally at this point. And there are in Massachusetts, I think, they're increasing now. I think there are 14 or 15 district courts that have in them drug court sessions, and that's really a better term for them, drug court sessions. But other problems that, other than drugs, that these kind of sessions have been used for are mental health issues, issues that pertain specifically to veterans, and those are the particular ones that I'm aware of, not just aware of, that are in Massachusetts. I think those are Those are the primary ones. Drug courts are the most prevalent ones. There's only 2 mental health courts, I believe, in Massachusetts right now. And they're mostly, actually, in the district court. I think there's 1 in the juvenile court down in the Bristol County, and mental health courts in Springfield and Boston.
Okay. There's also an OUI court, but we look at that as a hybrid to drug court and consider it one,
Correct.
so to speak, right?
Correct.
Okay. So if I'm someone that is addicted to, let's pick a drug, heroin, and I get into some sort of trouble and come into the court system, why would I want to select drug court over just doing what I've got to do in the other court,
Right.
which is the main criminal court?
Well, first of all, the drug court was really created and is intended for high-risk, high-need people. That is, people who are high risk of reoffending and have a great need for services and supports and help with their addiction. So in your first-time offender, drug offender, straight possession, something like that, isn't automatically going to even have the option of going to drug court. And it isn't even the charge that would drive it. A person can be charged with larceny, but the root of the problem is drugs. So, but more often than not, the people who are in drug court are probationers, because it's post-dispositional. That is, they're no longer presumed innocent. Their case has been resolved. And as a condition of probation, as I said, they have to do drug court or one of the other courts. So they the session is run as a separate part of the court day, with the team members meeting first to discuss each of the cases, and then in open court, open to the public.
And there are some benefits, too, to selecting a specialty court, or in our case in air, a drug court,
Right.
as opposed to a regular court.
Right. The primary benefit you'd hope would be that the person completes the program and is no longer, or is clean. They're always going to be an addict, but they'll be clean. There are, depending on the case, the possibility that their case could be dismissed at the end of drug court if they get a particular kind of disposition. They certainly could avoid jail by completing the drug court program. So there are definitely advantages. The disadvantages, if you want to look at it that way, are it's very hard to do. It's not an easy program. Very intensive, a lot of work involved, a lot of demands on people in terms of what they have to do to comply with drug court, because it's very structured. The farther you go along, the better you do, the fewer structure, less structure, I should say, that there is. But it's not an easy program.
Yeah, they could still end up going to jail.
And they could still end up going to jail.
Right.
Exactly right.
Jeff, good point. And Jeff, from law enforcement's point of view, and I know you've told this story a number of times, but from law enforcement's point of view, for law enforcement that doesn't understand specialty courts, or in our case, drug court, some tend to look at this as the easy way out. Not so much around Air District Court, because I think you've been pretty instrumental in spreading the word with the various departments. But in other courts, I know I hear this. But what's your experience been with people who are in drug court? I mean, given the choice in many cases, and they are given a choice here. This is not something that is usually required of them to go to drug court. So given the choice, go to drug court and complete it, which is about a year program, or do probation, do random testing, maybe treatment, or jail time. What's your experience been with the people that are in drug court?
I have to admit, when I first got involved in it, I thought it was the easier way out for them to do. Then I got to go to the training. I got to see a lot of other drug courts by going to training.
Right.
Then I got involved with the Air District Court, drug court, and the sessions, and I found out that it's a lot harder for them to take drug court. The intense supervision, going in front of the judge every week for the beginning of it. You know, they're there every single week. They have a team of people scrutinizing their case every single week talking about them and talking about what's best for them. They're constantly getting drug screened in the beginning of the program. You're not going to get a lot of that on regular probation.
Right.
You're not going to get the treatment and the assistance by just taking your jail time. So I definitely learned quickly that it's a lot harder to go that route, and it really works well for the ones that will get it at a certain point and say, I could have a better life. And those are the ones that really make a difference and that we don't see again.
As far as screening is concerned, in other words, when I say screening, I mean, how is one accepted into a specialty court?
Well,
You kind of touched on it a little bit, but
Well, there's going to be really two avenues. It could be someone who has an open criminal case, and as the resolution of
Right,
that
good
case,
point.
by generally as a plea agreement, a condition of probation would be that they go to drug court. Now, it could be the judge's idea, could be the defense lawyer's idea, could be the prosecutor's idea, could be the probation officer's idea at that stage, or any combination of those people to suggest it and to agree to it. And as I think you know, Ernie, there are some attorneys who do not believe in drug court at all because it's harder, not because it's easier, and who think that they are doing their clients a disservice if they would let them go to drug court. Drug court, I think, is a long-term view of helping someone. That is, you're dealing with them hopefully in a way that will help them for their looking at their life, as opposed to if you just deal with the case and get it resolved in the normal way, they're just going to reoffend. And obviously the primary reason that I think drug court is worth doing for the right defendant is to reduce recidivism. The other way a person can get into drug court is when they're already on probation and they have a problem. They have a violation of their probation, and then their probation officer generally would be the one who would suggest to the judge, and they have a right to a lawyer at that point as well, to do drug court as an added condition of probation. And that's I think many times eventually how people get into drug. I think that's probably the most common way, although we get a lot of people, in their first, right off the disposition of the original case.
I think one of the main issues that defense attorneys have with respect to drug court, and again, I can only talk about the Air District Court, but is that they're concerned that the client's rights, constitutional rights, are not being properly protected. What have you got to say about that? What's your experience with someone, number one, keeping in mind that they still are on probation at that point? What's your experience with the rights of those people being protected in drug court?
Well, first of all, I think their rights are protected, but the thing that I think you need to keep in mind is they're on probation. They have not the same rights. They actually have reduced rights compared to what they had when they were presumed innocent before their case was disposed of. So that's an important point. That doesn't mean they have no rights, but they don't have the same rights once they're on probation. I think we try very hard to be sure that their rights are protected, that they are not detained. For example, one of the options in drug court is a sanction and reward program. That is, someone does poorly, they test positive, they don't show up for treatment, they don't do community service, whatever. They don't meet one of the requirements or more, one or more of the requirements, then they might receive a sanction that the team would agree on, the judge would impose. And one of those sanctions would be to be detained in jail for a week. That's probably the worst sanction, to be detained. And so they have a right to an attorney and a right to a hearing. They're not just detained without a hearing, without an attorney representing them. So I think there are a lot of misunderstandings of what happens in drug court, how it happens. My experience has always been that the more people know about drug court, the more they are supportive of it as a concept, and that a lot of people who think they're against it, or who are against it, it's because they don't really know much about drug court.
Right.
The biggest statements always is I'm here to get the best deal I can from my client, and they're not looking at their lifestyle. They're not looking at the number of times they've been in courts because of stealing, to support their habit over and over again.
Yep.
They're getting the best deal for the one particular charge and not looking further ahead.
Right. There are undoubtedly many attorneys, defense attorneys that feel that way, that their job is to focus on the crime at hand, to do the best they can under those circumstances for that client and move on.
Right.
And if that client happens to come back, so be it, but that's what you do that day.
Right.
And you're right, it's the shortest or the longest method, depending on how you want to look at things. Let's talk a little bit about the staffing sessions. You mentioned those briefly too. The staffing sessions, and Judge Brooks now, for those of you out there, is managing the Lawrence drug court.
Correct.
And was for quite some time doing the Air drug court. So we have similar experience. However, I'm sure it's different in Lawrence than it is in Air. Just describe what the meetings are about.
Right. Well, when the meetings, we have a docket. The meetings beforehand, we go through the list of all the people who are in drug court and how they're doing that week. And it may be somebody who's going to be in court, or it may be someone who's not going to be in court, but at least in the team meeting, the team that consists of the members we discussed earlier discuss how the person's doing. Do they meet all their requirements? Did they have a good week? Are there any problems we should know about? Did they get rearrested? Whatever. If it's a case that's going to be called in court, when we get into the courtroom, then we will kind of address what issues, if any, there were discussed in the team meeting directly with the probationer. And I think you can remember, each of you, that we've had occasions in Air where we would be aware of a particular problem in the team meeting, but when we got into the court session and we actually asked the probationer about it, it wasn't quite exactly the way we had been told it was, or there was something different about it. Not always. Sometimes, and
Right.
you know, one of the realities of dealing with people who are addicted to substances like drugs and alcohol is that they can be manipulative and they can lie and they can mislead you because they're trying to stay with their bad habits that they develop as an addict. And so it really is, in my experience, for everybody on the team, really kind of an art to try to approach each person in the best way possible for that person at that time, because they're all at different stages of treatment or
Right.
addiction or whatever. And so the team meeting is really the place where you have kind of the update on every person. And then, and you'll hear from treatment providers, not just the court people. And then, and again, I should add in terms of rights that obviously the privacy rights in terms of confidentiality and therapy and things like that are honored in the treatment, the team session as well. So that's what the team meeting, the staffing is pretty much about. Usually in Air, I think we did it for an hour and a half before the court session.
Right.
And in Lawrence, we only do it for 45 minutes, just because of the court schedule. It's just too busy a court. We can't get the time.
Right. Anything you want to add to that? Because you're in all of those meetings.
Yeah, I think the meetings go really well with the people that are there. Having treatment there is really important to get their take on the person's recovery. Myself, I bring in the information from all the other departments. You know, if we have any questions about anybody from a certain town or something like that that's in there, I'll contact the police department, you know, ask them if there's been any new problems or anything like that. So it works out really well. There's a lot of times that we go into the session knowing something, and the person goes in front of the judge and they're still insistent, oh, nope, I didn't do that. And then when the judge goes down the list of what we know, it's like, okay, I guess you do know more than I thought. So the team sessions are a really important part of it.
The other dynamic that I have seen over the years is the dynamic that even though people are expected to fall into a specific role because of their title,
Right.
they don't always seem to fall into that role. And by that I mean, and I'll just use an example, and no matter which one I use, it'll be a bad one, but probation is all for locking up somebody because of something they did during the week. And you have Jeff saying, no, there's no way. No,
Or the
not
prosecutor.
for that.
Or the prosecutor.
Or the prosecutor. I mean, that's why I say no matter which one I pick, it's going to be a bad one because
right.
there are so many variants in the way we think.
Correct. And I think that was our experience in our team. And I think that one of the controversial aspects that you mentioned earlier in terms of lawyers and the defense lawyers is that there's a certain perspective is that the person on the team should always be defending what happens going to happen to the person regardless of anything else. Mm-hmm. And I understand that. I was an attorney for many years before I was a judge. But I think the drug court model requires a different mindset. And not that you would ever not protect someone's rights, but as you mentioned earlier, that the larger issue of what's best for them long term so that they won't be committing crime again.
Right.
And that's a delicate balance.
You also mentioned, as you were speaking earlier, about the reward system versus the opposite.
Sanctions.
I don't like to talk about. But can you explain the two?
Well, the rewards are harder to find.
They are.
That's true. I know we tried in air, for example, Dunkin' Donuts coupons, things like that. When someone has a good week. Now, one of the things I should mention.
We haven't got Starbucks, by the way. So if anybody's out there that wants to
right.
give Starbucks, that would be great.
Right. But one of the things I didn't mention in terms of the differences between the drug court session and the regular court session. For example, the way I run it, when I speak to the defendants, the probationers, I call them by their first name. In regular court, I would never do that. I would call them Mr. Smith or Miss whatever. Mm-hmm. Secondly, when someone has a good week, we applaud. That is everyone in the room.
Right.
And I know it sounds very hokey. I agree with that.
I always thought it was.
Yep. Do you still think it is?
I always thought it was until we stopped doing it when
That's
we
right, we
changed
did.
judge.
Right.
Yep.
And they questioned it and wanted it
It
back.
was a big deal, and it is a big deal.
Well, in the absence of applause, when you've had a bad week, is even more significant.
Yeah.
That's what I
Yes.
find.
That definitely.
Yeah, and so that's just as an example. That's a reward you get because I think one of the things we all have found in dealing with people, and obviously, drug addicts and substance abusers are of all economic levels of life.
Absolutely,
But
yep.
many of these people, for whatever their status in life, they haven't had a lot of affirmation. They haven't had a lot of feedback that's been positive, particularly as they've gotten deeper into drug use. And so something as simple as applauding them for having a good week has great resonance with them. Mm-hmm. And I find that it becomes meaningful. And again, when you tell people this, it doesn't seem possible. People scoff at it. The real reward in drug court, of course, is being moved along in the program so that you graduate. The drug court in air is a 4-phase program. Like the first phase is 8 weeks, and then 12 weeks, and then 12 weeks, and then the last phase, I think, is 20 weeks.
20 weeks. Right.
So,
Yep.
and most people don't complete it in a year without any bumps in the road. So most people, it's anywhere from 1 to 2 years, I would think. We've had people, I think, as long as 3.5 years.
Yes, we have.
Drug court. In Lawrence, for example, it's right now a 3-phase program.
Oh.
And we're thinking about going to a 4-phase program. So anyway, so one of the rewards really is being moved from phase to phase to phase, and in each phase there are fewer constraints on the person because we hope the person will have internalized those things that they learned about dealing with their addiction when there was more structure. So the real reward, I think we had a hard time finding rewards, concrete rewards for people, but I think really succeeding in the program. I mean, I used to say to people, your reward today is you don't have to talk to me very much.
Right.
But that didn't seem to really make much
No,
difference.
actually, they thought that was the opposite of. Right. They'd rather talk to you. But the other thing we used to do is the Tootsie Pops.
Well, that's right. And we don't do that in Lawrence, but do you still do that?
We do.
Yeah, and then that is it. They get and then again, it sounds silly. I know we had a basket of Tootsie Roll Pops, and if they had a good week, they could take one. And I think again,
And of course, if they had 2 children with them, they took 3.
That's right.
So,
but we found, I think, that when people didn't get one, it sounds silly. It meant something to them.
It did.
And again, it was representative. It wasn't really, I think, of course,
Right.
the pop, but it,
The fact that they got something.
yeah,
Right.
a reward. And I think, again, these are things that unless you see it happen and you see it in action, you don't believe it. And I mean, Ernie, we always make fun of Ernie because at graduations, you always cry.
Yeah, typically I do.
But
Yeah,
it's
I'm
because
a
they're
softie. I'm a
but
softie.
it's because it's you've seen how far people can come. We've seen people come from really the depths to really being on a solid footing, and it's an amazing thing to see. The mantra we always have, because we let people address the court at their graduation from drug court is always, you know, I hated you all when I started. This was the worst thing that ever happened to me, and now I can't thank you enough for saving my life. That's what people say. I mean, how many times have we heard that?
Yeah, a lot.
So it's a pretty amazing program, and I would encourage people to come to Air on Thursdays or to Lawrence on Wednesdays or any of the other courts in the state that have drug courts. The court sessions, not the staffing meetings, but the court sessions are open to the public.
Right. 2 o'clock in Air on Thursday. The other thing that is most rewarding, I think, is when you see someone who's been in drug court for a year and a half, 2 years, and then all of a sudden they have a family show up to say
Right.
they recognize the difference.
Right.
Not so much that the person did, but they recognize the difference. And you can imagine what families live with when they have an addict in the family. I
There's
mean,
many-
we can all imagine that. So
Many times when the beginning of the session, when they're first coming in, nobody comes with them.
nobody wants to be
And-
anywhere near them.
Then you'll start seeing as they progress through it and that they've changed a little bit and stuff, all of a sudden there's a family member coming to the session.
Right.
And then by graduation, they have 5, 6 people
Right.
that came to see them graduate.
Right, and the thing that you realize is that you didn't just affect that one person.
Right.
You affected their immediate family, their children, their friends. I mean, it can be when it's successful, an amazing thing.
The other side benefit that we haven't mentioned, which is huge, is the number of drug-free babies that we've actually had during drug court. Not in the sessions, of course, folks, but people who had babies while they were in drug court and the baby came out drug-free. That has saved the Commonwealth
Millions of dollars.
literally millions of
Correct.
dollars. And it's something that will never be appreciated because it didn't happen.
Right.
But yeah, that's the big
Yeah,
reward.
no, that's a great example, though, of the kind of unintended positive consequence that you
Right.
get from drug court
Right.
that you weren't expecting to begin with. But it's hard. Not everybody makes it, as we've discussed before.
Yep. Well, I want to thank both of you for coming. And Jeff, you'll be back again, won't you?
Sure.
On something.
Sure, I will.
Sooner or later. And Judge, again.
Thank you,
Thank
Ernie.
you. And we hope you're back soon again as well. And out there, I want to thank all of you for watching. And please come back and see us again next time.